We have a crazy situation right now in Ukraine. Media that barely even wants to report it. The United States is currently backing a full-blown invasion of Russia. Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. This is from the Institute for the Study of War. Of course, you want to color in and keep in mind their own bias, but this is basically the best data that we have. Russian forces have been pushed back some 30 square kilometers or so inside of their own territory. And again, this is internationally recognized Russian territory, not territory that they have previously claimed in the Kursk region of Russia. According to Russian officials, some 100,000 Russian citizens have had to flee the area. There are approximately 1 million who are there. There are several towns that have been taken over by the Ukrainians in a so-called shock offensive. Now, the reason why it's a shock is that according to the Ukrainians and to the US narrative, this is supposed to be a war of defense from invasion. So to counter their invasion, Krystal, they have decided to invade territory which they deem Russian. Now, philosophically, I don't really have a problem with this. Of course, whenever you're in a war, you should be doing whatever you need to. The issue is not what the Ukrainians are doing. It's the fact that US NATO weaponry is being employed to literally invade Russia.
Yeah.
And when we flip it around and we consider what it would look like here, this is not disputed territory. This is internationally recognized.
Well. Saagar, it's not going the way you thought, is it? Saagar's been predicting, and it's mostly him, not Krystal. Krystal kind of remains quiet. She's more the pro-Palestinian person. He's the more anti-Ukraine commentator on Breaking Points. But Saagar has been predicting the end of this war forever. He constantly says they're never going to win, nothing's going to happen, they can't do it, they can't do anything. And then he constantly gets proven wrong. Not that they've won the war or anything like that. Specifically in the Black Sea, that they've pretty much eliminated Russia. And now, considering that Ukraine is having a hard time pushing through Russian defenses on the east because, you know, they have the fortified lines, so why would they just run headfirst into trenches, dragon's teeth, minefields? It's like Saagar's like, hey, why don't they just run into the Donbass where they have giant minefields and tons of trenches where they're sitting ducks. So what Ukraine's trying to do is they're trying to attack kind of from the south, going into Crimea, and from the north. This is actually pretty smart. Of course, it's risky. Everything in a war is risky, but watching Breaking Points kind of freak out. It's kind of funny. Even the way Saagar's saying this, first of all, he's saying that the media's not reporting on it. They haven't reported on it. This is the first video they've talked about it. And it happened like 6 days ago. So Breaking Points hasn't been reporting on it because they can't figure out how to spin this. They keep saying Ukraine can't do anything. They need to immediately negotiate. And it'd be interesting to know what negotiation they're advocating for. Because I think most people at this point would say that they're open to an idea of negotiating. Certainly the lines of negotiation being open wouldn't be a bad idea. But what is Saagar really talking about when he's talking about negotiating? Is he talking about a Hitler and France negotiation? Where they split up the country and Hitler makes France demilitarize the South? Or is he talking about they give up a few land, maybe they take Crimea and some of the Donbass and they give the rest of it back to Ukraine? It seems like Russia probably is not going to give up the 20% of the country they have right now, but they might not have a choice. So be very wary whenever you hear someone say negotiate. Ask them what they mean by that, because they could be saying something that like Lex Friedman says, where he says if they could have a negotiation where the lines go back to what they were before the 2022 invasion, they should take that. So Russia would have Crimea and a few parts of the Donbass, but they'd have to give up the rest. I don't think that's what Saagar wants. I think Saagar wants a complete surrender. And I wish someone would just ask him, be like, are you just talking about a complete surrender of where they just surrender and then Russia can then, it's completely on Russia's terms of what to do, of which case they would take the entire country. Be wary of the negotiation bros. Ask them what they mean by that. If it's a reasonable negotiation, like what Lex Friedman says, I'd say it's more reasonable. But that's not what Saagar's talking about. So watching him flip and flap around is hilarious. It's an invasion of Russia, but I mean, it's okay, I guess. But the military-industrial complex, it's our weapons. Even the headline, Ukraine invades Russia. Of course, invades Russia in capital letters with U.S. backing. With U.S. backing, we're actually not sure how much the U.S. backed this, actually. The State Department's certainly not mad at them for doing this, but they're not also saying, yeah, we totally told them to do this. They haven't really said much of anything. They've said they're kind of okay with it, but it's the truth.
An invasion. And that is literally the justification for every dollar of the hundreds of billions that we have shipped to Ukraine, is to defend against this invasion. And then just consider, can any great power nation sit there and tolerate an invasion of its own territory? If Mexico invaded, even up until the city of Laredo or El Paso, would we tolerate that? No. We would bomb them back to the Stone Age.
Yeah, this is where he keeps flipping around. Yes, Russia will not tolerate this. They will bomb Ukraine. You know what? They might actually invade Ukraine. I mean, maybe he's talking about nuclear weapons, but once again, he's flapping around. At first he said it was kind of okay. Because, I mean, World War II, did we just, not invade German-occupied areas? Of course we did. Did we not topple their governments? Of course we did. He's obviously against this, but he can't exactly figure out why. It's like, well, Russia invade Ukraine. Can they invade parts of Russia? No, yes. I'm confused. Crap, why don't they just surrender and lose? Saagars, he's something else. He's flapping around. He's in the wind.
Age as the sayings go. Now, let's be fair too. This has also demonstrated the tremendous problems with the Russian military that they haven't been able to immediately push this back. Put this up there, for example, on the screen. The Financial Times reports Russian reinforcements have failed to push back the Ukrainian incursion. The sixth day, President Zelensky has openly acknowledged taking the war to Russian territory.
Yeah, so Sagar says this is in the sixth day. They've been doing this for the last 6 days, and they've held this territory. Once again, why isn't Breaking Points covered it? They were just complaining the media is not covering it. The media is definitely covering it. Look at CNN, New York Times. What do you mean? Isn't his point that the media is not pro-Russia, pro-Ukraine? Which it is. Certainly liberal media is. They are covering it a lot. You can't get his talking points right. He should be saying the media, which is on the side of Ukraine and on the side of the military-industrial complex, is covering this constantly. Instead, he's like, the media's not covering it. Yes, they are. You guys waited 6 days to cover it because you tried to figure out some way to spin this.
And there is no doubt, Krystal, that this is 100% with the backing of the United States of America. And given Joe Biden's decline that we just talked about at length, is he even in charge here? And as Americans, can we sit here and risk a literal invasion of Russia at the same time that we have billions of dollars in military assets steaming towards the Middle East, and with the Israelis openly saying Iran is going to attack us, and the United States is going to have to once again spend billions to defend Israel from that attack? Can we really tolerate the risk of these two? And the fact that they probably contribute. The Iranians say, hey, we got a lot of military assets tied up over there. And the Russians are saying, got a lot of military assets tied up over there.
That's very true. Yeah. And meanwhile, the media has basically lost interest in this story.
No,
There's
they don't
very
care.
little coverage of it. J.D. Vance and all of his many interviews he did yesterday, there was not, I think, one question about...
He brought it up once in a print interview. But yes, to any of the media people, they didn't bring it up.
They didn't bring it up.
Yeah.
What could be more important than we're backing the invasion of a nuclear-armed superpower? And hey, how's this going to end? Where is this leading? What's your plan? If you were in the White House, what would your side of the equation be? And there's zero interest in it. People have lost interest in this story because it is a lot messier than it was in the early days when it was just like, go Ukraine, and Ukraine had Russia on the back foot. Now you're in this long, grinding war of attrition. And make no doubt about it, the fact that the Biden administration finally caved and sent those F-16 fighter jets, that is a big part of the reason why they were able to make these gains. You'll recall, early on in this war, Biden was very resistant. He was very careful about what he sent. There was a lot of concern about potential escalation.
So it is true that Ukraine has F-16s. We're not sure if they're being used in this, but I actually think Krystal's onto something, though it's kind of interesting because she was against, once again, Breaking Points is hilarious. They were against sending the F-16s, saying they weren't going to do anything. Now she's admitting the F-16s might have been used, and they've made the biggest land grab in the entire war. In fact, they've grabbed more Russian territory than Russia's gained in the last year in Ukraine.
Idea in the beginning that you would send F-16 fighter jets to enable Ukrainian invasion of Russia would have been considered insane.
Right.
And yet here we are, and no one's even talking about it, which is even more insane, quite frankly.
But how would, if they were to win, how would she want them to do it? They're just going to say it's impossible, but how would she want them to do it? I don't get it. Every war is won by invading, typically, is won by invading the territory and at least taking out assets in that territory. They did bombings of oil fields, the last year. That was effective. They might take a power plant. That's what people are worried about. But of course you would do an invasion to the territory and at least take out assets that are bombing you. There's a bunch of airfields that are right along the border of Ukraine. Should they not take out those airfields? This is so... They don't want to give any way that Ukraine could win because they're going to say they can't win.